Hello, welcome everyone to today's webinar. The title of the webinar is Ocean Plastic Problems, Challenges and Solutions. My name is Sarah Cragg and I'm Practice Lead of Sustainability at Mullenlow Salt, and I'm also the Chair of the British Chamber Sustainability Committee. At the Sustainability Committee, we work with all the other business leading groups and committees to try to help support companies in Singapore, wherever they may be in their journey in sustainability. Whether that's just at the beginning of their sustainability or are more experts as part of our chamber. But we really try to make sure we're providing information to really help educate on business sustainability and also some of the solutions as well. And that leads us perfectly on to today's webinar. We all know that ocean plastic is a global environmental issue, but did you know it's also a social one? To solve it, we really need to engage people at all levels of business, government and society. Today, we're here to discuss the root causes and how your business can be part of that solution. As we go along, please post your questions into the Q&A box on the Zoom toolbar. These will either be addressed throughout the session or at the end in the Q&A section. We have a fantastic panel of speakers with us today, and I'm delighted to introduce you to our moderator, Stephanie Lavelle, who's Project Director of Seas Sanctuaries Trust, to start the session. Stephanie is currently the Project Director of this UK-based charity that have marine conservation efforts in Indonesia for over the last 10 years. Prior to this role, Stephanie acquired over 10 years experience working in areas of industry, marine science, conservation, and environmental monitoring and policy development. And welcome, Stephanie.
Good afternoon and good morning. I'm coming to you from the UK and it's a real pleasure to be here. So thank you very much to the British Chamber of Commerce for the invite and for everyone involved in hosting this event, which looks to lead into some really interesting discussions today on this very quickly growing global issue of plastic pollution. So before we introduce our speakers, I'm going to briefly introduce the scale of this problem as summarised by the excellent report published this year by the Pew Charitable Trust and a partnership with relevant experts from across industries and geographies relating to plastic pollution and the plastic life cycle. This report is called Breaking the Plastic Wave, and it summarises that we essentially know we're producing over 300 million tonnes every year of new plastic, which is about equivalent to the human population by weight. And this is expected to at least double by 2040, not including any influences of COVID-19. We know that inputs into the ocean are already exceeding over 10 million tonnes every year, and this is expected to triple by 2040, when around 4 billion people are expected to be without waste management. This paper predicts that even if we fulfill every current industry and policy government commitment, we will only reduce inputs by 7% from the expected increase in 2040 in a business as usual scenario. However, the paper suggests that if we do invest in immediate implementation of 8 complementary system interventions across the plastic value chain, as well as considering maritime sources and microplastic sources, then we could potentially reduce inputs into the ocean by 80% by 2040. Our biggest focus has to be on the reduction of consumption, which they suggest has to be reduced by 1/3. Improvement of waste collection, particularly in low and middle income countries, suggesting that we need a 90% improvement in waste infrastructure in urban areas and a 50% improvement in rural areas. We also need to reduce our waste exports by 90% and improve our waste infrastructure by at least doubling our recycling capacity and the design of recyclable products. So now to welcome and introduce our speakers who will be discussing different academic, grassroots and corporate aspects that we are driving towards solutions. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today and putting together some presentations for us. First up, we have Anya Phelan from the University of Queensland, who's going to give us an overview on science targets, producer responsibility, source and post-consumer opportunities, and impact investing to circular economy. Good afternoon, Anya.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'll go ahead and share the screen here. As always, it's never a simple, hopefully this will work? All right, I think we're in business. All right, what I'm going to do is share a bit with everyone on the I think it should be all right. Can everybody see that? I think it's the larger screen. Apologies.
Yeah, it's on your presenter view at the moment.
Yeah. I think it was exactly the one you didn't want me to use. Tell me exactly how to get out of the presenter view.
So you've gone back onto normal view at the moment. I think if you click your, it's a bit of a different, maybe if you go into slide, if you click the slideshow tab at the top, it might say play.
Yeah, so let me get, I'll stop sharing for a second. Sincere apologies, everyone. 2 seconds, I will just switch that. Let's see, let's try this one more time. Share. There we go.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
We'll just roll with this. Okay, I'm just not getting the actual slideshow to go, and I'm chewing up into one more time. Apologies again. Share this, and last attempt. All right, we'll just go with this one. Essentially, what I wanted to do is tell the audience a bit about a study we recently did, specifically in Indonesia, that looked at how remote and island communities are seeing and addressing the plastic crisis and what are they experiencing through their lens. There's a project called Small Island Initiative for Plastic Free Ocean, and we collaborated with the Indonesian Institute of Science on that one, as well as 2 universities in Indonesia. So Stephanie mentioned the statistics are pretty dreadful, and a lot of plastic waste leaks into the ocean every year, predominantly from coastal regions. And interestingly, the majority of it is packaging. So of course, this threatens livelihoods, marine life, and also ecosystem production and function. The communities in the remote regions are really on the front line, and their experience and their perception of the issue is what we were looking to find out and really understand better. Just for context, and I suspect most everyone in Southeast Asia is aware of the complex geography that is Indonesia and the thousands of islands that are there. Very difficult to address waste management. And we looked at 4 areas in Sulawesi, West Papua, the Malukus, so Southeast and Southwest Sulawesi, using numerous methods. So what do we find out? We found out that in a typical village, there's each at a household level, there's approximately 4,000 kilograms of rubbish is generated, half of which is plastic, and entirely all of which enters the oceans. This, of course, has impacts on livelihoods and health of the community, and certainly the other species. Management of it leads, of course, to addressing traditional ways of incineration and burning, which will probably have long-term health consequences. A lot of this is quite well known, but I just want to point out there are limited disposal options, hence these complex problems. And there's, of course, overwhelming volumes coming in on the currents through what is understood as seasonal monsoons. So these transboundary plastic flows really complicate the issues for the communities. All of these photos are from the study, so they're all completely from the field. There's also something dominating a lot of emerging economies, and that's, of course, the sachet economy. And these small non-recyclable plastic single-use packaging that is exponentially growing through most of the regions, and especially in remote areas. Convenience is important, and if inexpensive single-use options are available, the rising standard of living in a lot of these areas are actually allowing access to convenience of processed and packaged foods and goods and packages. And waste management is really relying on village funds. So in summary, what's going on? We got, just like in other parts of the world, but specifically in these regions that don't, in my opinion, do not get a lot of attention, what plastic waste is most certainly outpacing mitigation efforts. And there are numerous driving factors. So as I mentioned, the increased availability of processed and packaged goods through the fast-moving consumer goods sector, seasonal plastic waste brought through on currents. So the plastic waste is not seasonal, but the storms are that bring it. There's really, again, minimal opportunities to actually, even when education and awareness of the issue is increased, where to throw out and the rubbish is very limited. As a result of the plastic literacy survey that we did demonstrated, even something like recycling was not understood by the majority of our participants. There's a whole other elements, including institutional constraints, and what, of course, we saw was minimal producer responsibility. So this is just some of the causal loop diagrams we used, and I won't go too much into it, but what I do want to mention is that the communities are shouldering this large global complex environmental problem, and there's obviously tremendous amount of inequity in that space. So what can be done? So how can responsible supply chains and how can this emerging paradigm of the circular economy contribute to this kind of dominated sachet built economy? This is a recent launch that, well, it came out of a combination of the GEF, the UN, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Advancing Marine Plastics Organization, and a number of others. This is a roadmap that has laid out ways for industry, government, and individual organizations to really tackle this huge issue. This is just a start, and I wanted to use this as a pivot to link into this circular economy territory that is now kind of dominating this discourse towards solutions. So when we go into solutions focus, circular economy comes up. So what exactly is it? It's essentially an industrial economy. It's this system that is looking to regenerate natural capital rather than destroy natural capital. There's a whole idea of keeping resources and materials in circulating for as long as possible. I'll present a little bit more on its elements and then what are some of the initiatives we're seeing. Of course, this is just our current linear model, what otherwise known as kind of the take, make, waste economy. This is where we're playing now. Where we're trying to go collectively is into the system level value creation, where there's better innovation and design. We have secondary markets emerging and policies supporting this. So legislation and is really helping the consumers and the producers work together. This is one of my favorite representations of what circular economy is. It's not linear and it's not about recycling at all. It's actually about not just one manufacturer, but all the manufacturers across the value chain coming across and collaborating and engaging. So back to these, scary facts. We have tremendous amount of resources that are extracted and less than 9% recycled globally. And especially with packaging, we're seeing over 46% of packaging winding up directly into the landfills and making their way into the ocean. So this is commercially unsustainable, to say the least. Aspects of the circular economy include using renewable energy sources, supply chain, value chain collaboration, and ways to regenerate ecosystems. These are the three principles that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has really summarized this concept into. And this is, just to clarify, this understanding, the term circular economy stems from other terms like industrial ecology and things like performance economy. And it's been around since the 70s, but it's really in the last 10 years that we've seen this resurgence, which is brilliant. So it's making huge impact. And one of the most important ones to note here is the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment. They have over 400 signatories, including industry, businesses, institutions, nation states. And these are efforts to reduce plastic pollution. So I could talk a little bit more on that if anyone's got questions. Really, probably the key element of what the circular economy is all about is not combining what's called, understood as technical nutrients or resources with the biological. And that's because it's very difficult to separate them. And these are some of the origins. I have a really great example. If there's time later, I can talk about it, of using discarded fishing nets in carpet. So it's probably one of my favorite industry examples where it's incredibly effective and is working really well. And this point is that that plastic pollution is not only impacting ecosystems, it's certainly impacting business. We have public awareness on this issue has grown exponentially as much as the pollution itself, and is ranking sometimes first and in other regions, geographies, second after climate change. So there's tremendous pressure. So businesses are looking for solutions, and consumers are demanding these solutions. So the fast-moving consumer goods companies rank this as one of their top sustainability issues. And a recent report from the Boston Consulting Group identified plastic packaging is among the top environmental, social, and governmental issues for these same multinational companies. And just to wrap up, so what are the steps forward that we're seeing? Extended producer responsibility schemes. So these are policy tools. We're seeing quite a bit of them coming through the EU, India, Canada, and these legislation frameworks really help bring that responsibility, but also support the producers to ensure that the plastic doesn't end up in the ocean. A lot of investment in waste management infrastructure and recycling capabilities, support for municipality, long-term, especially in emerging economies. And what the global commitment has really initiated is looking at alternative materials, so compostable, biopolymers, et cetera, and better delivery methods, reusable, refillable business models for packaging. So we need redesign, we need infrastructure and other financial mechanisms like plastic credits. It's great and it's coming along, but all of these represent anywhere from 2 to 4% of what is being done in this. And we have a long way to go to ensure that this is the new normal, and this is how well, consumers, businesses, government, and NGOs are all in partnership working together towards this ultimate goal of transitioning to the circular economy. So we're after, collectively creating these new economic opportunities, and of course, ensuring environmental and societal benefits. Thanks very much, and apologies for a little technical hiccup initially.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was fantastic. And next up, we have Tom Peacock-Nazil and Ben Moody from 7 Clean Seas, who will introduce their grassroots program and look at what's being done on the ground to solve plastic accumulation and how this can align with company sustainability efforts.
Hi, thank you, Stephanie. Hi there, everyone. Like Stephanie just said, my name is Tom Peacock. I'm the founder of an ocean cleanup organisation called 7 Clean Seas. We started off very much as a grassroots kind of organisation based here in Singapore, actually. And over the course of kind of the last 2.5-3 years, we've transformed into something much more than that, which I will happily share with you in a moment. Just before we get into this, I do believe there is a poll in today's event, and we're going to ask you the same poll at the beginning and also at the end, just to see whether your opinion on the answer does change at any point in time. Now, the question is, do you think that your company could decrease their plastic footprint? Now, you might be thinking, yes, actually, we can make some changes. No, we don't need to. As a company, we don't produce or use plastic. We do hear that quite a lot. 3, we already are doing everything we can to decrease this. Or kind of lastly, no, I would like to know more about how my company could decrease its plastic footprint. So if you'd just like to take that poll, I think I need to take this as well. Okay, there we go, poll over. So there we go, that is quite an interesting score, actually. I'm not sure whether you guys can see this, so I will read it out. But 73% of participants have actually answered that, yes, we can make changes. So there is obviously a realization that businesses have a long way to go between where we are today and truly a circular model like Anya was discussing later on. We'll see whether that changes a little later on. But before that, I would just like to present my screen. Bear with me 1 second. So, who are we? Essentially, we started out in Singapore in 2018. Our goal was to really connect people at a grassroots level with the issue of ocean plastic pollution. Everybody sees the pictures on TV and they're kind of horrified by the images of all of the marine animals with straws up the nose or tangled in plastic. And it is truly horrific, but a lot of people still struggle to connect their own consumption habits and business consumption as well with that problem. So we started here doing community engagement, essentially educational, kind of vocational activities like beach cleanups, and quickly realized that the issue was much bigger and worse than I had originally kind of thought, which was not really a good realization. So what could we do about it? How can we learn and continue to learn to a point where we are almost experts on the subject? How do we develop a system that can help not just here in Singapore, but on our neighbors in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and specifically, how can we create a scalable solution, something that can actually work on a systemic level further down the line to really kind of tackle this issue? And that's really what we got stuck into. If you look at what our mission is today, it's come a long way from those early days. It's really to develop an economically sustainable funding mechanism, one that can fund ocean and river cleanup, one that can build waste management infrastructure in remote island locations, and also one that can still stay true to its cause and kind of empower local communities to reduce their plastic pollution. There is a lot of people trying to do a lot of good things in this space, but the issue is always going to be funding. How do we fund this infrastructure? How do we fund this activity? And without a solid economic model, it's just not going to work. It doesn't matter what we kind of what we develop, what we implement, unless there is a solid financial backbone to it. How do we scale it? And that's really kind of the level at which we engage this issue. But before we get into that, there was some great kind of a little intro actually from Stephanie on the ocean plastic, on breaking the wave from System IQ, the most recent kind of study looking at this. And to be honest, these figures are straight out of that. But everybody talks about ocean plastic pollution for its environmental effects. And of course, that's why I do what I do. But I think we're all missing the ballpark a little bit, because no one's discussing the fact that there's 2 billion people without waste collection, like no waste management whatsoever. Now, do you think these 2 billion people don't have plastic? No, of course they do. And they actually deserve to. And there's a whole ethical question behind actually people in remote and island locations who don't have waste management, and that plastic has to enter the natural environment. Like, they still deserve nice things and the nice things that plastic allows them to have. So we have to find a solution for this, because if we don't find a solution for the 2 billion people with no waste management, we're not going to fix ocean plastic pollution. And that's really kind of our angle. If you look at what we've achieved today, I'm incredibly proud of this. It's over 80,000 kilos now. It's going up kind of several tons a week at the moment, which is great. But it's almost an insignificant amount of kind of plastic when you compare it to the size of the issue. You know, that's not going to solve any of these issues at scale. So as proud as I am, we really have to look at mechanisms to allow us to scale up and collect in the hundreds of millions of kilos one day, which I'm sure we will be able to do. If we look kind of a little bit shorter term at the moment, we've given ourselves some goals, and that is to operate in the 7 worst plastic polluting countries by 2025. But we also want to recover 10 million kilos by 2025. Now, the way discussions are going and partnerships are working out, actually we may smash this out the park. And I hope we do, because 10 million kilos is a great achievement, but it's still a long way from where we need to be. At the bottom, there's a list of the 7 top plastic polluting countries from a very famous study back in, I think it was 2015. The green ones, Indonesia and Malaysia, we are on the ground in and active. And Vietnam, we're working with the United Nations Development Programme on an incubator over there to enter that market as well. But if you look at our solutions, our scalable solutions, we've really gone down 2 roads. You know, the first road is to develop a technology. If 70% of all ocean plastic is flowing through rivers, then why are we investing in ocean cleanup? You know, let's invest in cleaning the rivers, because that's the best ROI. You know, you've got the highest plastic density. It's brought to you on a regular occurrence because there's a flow in a river, and you can install some infrastructure and just kind of leave it there, just operate it on an ongoing basis. We realized that it's not really a competitive space, but there are competitors, and they tend to fall into these low volume, low cost solutions, which are absolutely amazing for a lot of small to medium sized rivers. But when we're looking at high capacity units, actually there's only 1 or 2 on the market, and the cost is incredible, to be honest. They're like 700,000 euro plus. There's one that's 3.5 million euro to clean 1 river. Now, how is that scalable? When we consider that there's thousands of rivers that need this infrastructure quickly, because we probably don't have time to build waste management infrastructure in the interim, how can we scale that? So we teamed up with Marina Bay Sands and Howden Insurance as funding partners, and developed a system that is literally a fraction of the price, but can still recover 1.5 million kilos annual capacity, which might be higher once we actually test it next year in Vietnam. Now, the second project is a lot closer to home. I suspect a lot of people on this call are here in Singapore. If you've spent some nice weekends over in Bintan, then that is exactly the location of our next project. All the way down the East Coast, most people don't realize this, but there's a marine protected area that's 1.2 million hectares. Now, that is an incredibly large marine protected area. It's an ecosystem that is of significance and that needs protecting, and has been given that protection in law, although unfortunately it's not enforced. So there's many, many issues. We're looking at 50% coral reef damage, looking at almost, well, just over 40% mangrove damage. And it's not getting any better, even though these are slightly older figures. It's filled with a community of amazing people who genuinely rely on the ocean for their livelihoods, but they don't have access to the basic waste management. In Tanjung Pinang, the city, there's 200,000 people. They do have waste management, but they're producing 400 tons a day of solid waste, of which only 160 is collected. That means 240 tons of solid waste per day is entering the natural environment just from Tanjung Pinang. So there's a huge opportunity here to go in there and not just hire people, vulnerable individuals who have lost their job because of COVID-19 in the tourism industry, which was our first step into this area, hiring 22 such people, but actually to go a step further and start building aggregation capabilities. How do we work with these communities on the outlying islands that don't have anything, and actually set up some level of waste management to stop that plastic flowing into the ocean in the first place, because then we never have to clean it up. And it's working. I don't know how, but it's going really well. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting 2021 to look back on this. And if any of you want to come down next year and see the team in action, or you want to come down with your companies, you're more than welcome. You can come see us in action. But of course, all of this isn't free. And this is really where the key to my message is that we need to develop a funding mechanism, an economic market mechanism that can pay for this. There are other things on the horizon, like I think Anya spoke about EPR, and then there's actual government spending on some of these areas as well. And they're great for kind of your high urban areas, but when we're looking at rural and island locations, which according to the study still contribute 45% of all ocean plastic pollution, how are we going to fund these infrastructure projects? For us, the answer is quite simple. You know, we've been doing this since 2018. It's plastic offsetting. The ability to work with a company with a plastic footprint. Say, look, guys, we're going to help you reduce that plastic footprint on a yearly, annual basis moving forward. But whilst we do that, you have to realize you're still using plastic that may enter the natural environment. So why don't you offset that by commissioning our team in Indonesia, our river cleanup system, to recover that same weight of plastic or intercept that same weight of plastic from the marine environment? It's a win-win-win, essentially. You know, you're winning because you're doing the right thing. You've got that marketing and communications benefit from a sustainability perspective as well. Let's not be naive about that. We win because we've got the ability to actually fund our cleanup efforts, and we've got the mandate to clean the oceans. It's really not that complex. And as part of the kind of progression of this market, we are now a project partner with the world's biggest carbon offsetting standards agency to help make standards in this space. So plastic offsetting is coming, and we need all the help we can get to get this market off the ground, because it unlocks a tremendous amount of capital which can be funneled directly into projects in the most needy locations. So I'll leave it there, but we'll have a chat later on. Hope you learned something, and if you've got any questions, feel free to shoot them over in the Q&As.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was a fantastic presentation. And last but by no means least, we have Jocelyn Matyas from the Incubation Network, who's going to discuss corporate levels of engagement and how companies are moving towards zero waste, and how we are contributing to issues, and how businesses can change wasteful behaviours. Over to you, Jocelyn.
Great, thanks so much. So I don't have any slides today. We'll just have an open conversation. I find it's easiest that way. Otherwise, the slides would be a little text heavy from our end. But my lovely fellow panelists have already now outlined most of the challenges that we face, especially here in South and Southeast Asia. And I'd love to just dive a little bit deeper about one word that's really specific in our brand. So as you can see up in my screen, we are the Incubation Network, and I specifically work as our venture development lead. And what that actually translates to is that the Incubation Network is focused on supporting and scaling and the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem that is across Asia, with a focus on reducing ocean plastic pollution, ideally ending ocean plastic pollution. So we really look as the catalyst to reversing these trends, to being in entrepreneurship and innovation. That's not to say that entrepreneurship and innovation is by any means a silver bullet, nor that it holds responsibility, but we recognize the key role that innovation entrepreneurship plays in really helping us envision a future where we do not have plastic in our environment. So the incubation level of our work is pretty straightforward. We work a lot with incubating and accelerating key solutions, ventures, and business models that will help reduce ocean plastic pollution, with the focus here on South and Southeast Asia. Now, the last word of our brand, network, is one that is really intentional and also at the center of our work. And I think there's so many different points that both Anna and Tom pointed to about how specifically when we talk about waste here in South and Southeast Asia, which is responsible for a dominant amount of what ends up in our oceans, the community is at the center. Unlike what you might be used to in the UK or in Europe or even in the US, the waste systems here are fragmented, decentralized, and in some cases, as Tom pointed out, for over 2 million people, just non-existent. So to that point, what we realize is in order to drive solutions and progress towards ending ocean plastic pollution, we really need to look at this issue as a global community. And more specifically, we really need to understand the ecosystem or the network of players and what we each bring to the table. The local communities are so important in helping us reach the communities that use plastics every day, helping them understand and helping them play a role in better waste management behaviors and systems. And on the other end, as a region, there's so much that comes into leveraging the power and also the resources that various stakeholders have at the regional level to really help, push forward key initiatives that need to happen to end ocean plastic pollution, whether they're in innovation and research or whether they're in policy, and really understanding as a region what we can do and how we can catalyze a more significant change is super important. But last but not least, something that we also recognize is the role that a global network and a global community plays. While the waste problem is obviously a problem that is global, as we mentioned, the contexts and the applications of solutions is going to vary from those local to national to regional levels. However, that doesn't mean we should discredit the solutions and the progress that's being made in other countries, such as what you might even see, home in Britain. And so what we also work with at the Incubation Network is trying to be a kind of hub that those global solutions can come to. And as a community of innovators, we can refine those and help pilot those refined models here in South and Southeast Asia to really find a replicable model that we can replicate quickly across the region. And so I hope that shares a little bit with you about really what the essence is of the Incubation Network and what role we really aim to play here at the center of the plastic waste and the plastic waste crisis in Asia. What I know that I was asked to speak a little bit about today is really then, from a network perspective, what role do corporates play? There is obviously, a level of education and awareness that is super important, as Anna pointed to, and there's obviously always the potential for engaging in organizations and activities like Tom's to really start seeing the offsetting and the numbers and impact that you're having in the community. But sometimes it's really hard to think of kind of what are your next steps? Where are you now, and how do you deepen your engagement? And I think that was shown a little bit in some of the responses from our poll earlier today. So there's a spectrum that we at the network use for our both social and environmental impact. And I think it's really helpful for some corporates to refer to when you're thinking of what you can do in ending ocean plastic pollution. So it's a 4-stage kind of spectrum. The first stage is awareness. The second stage is sensitivity. The third stage is responsiveness. And then the fourth stage is transformation. So what it really is it's really just an evaluation framework where you can see where you are and where you want to move to. So let's put this in context a little bit. Earlier, the Chamber of Commerce did the net zero survey to 66 companies in your network. And it mentioned that almost the second highest by less than a percentage point activity already in the sustainability and zero waste space is that companies were educating their staff around sustainability issues and opportunities. So that would be, when you evaluate what you're doing, you'd ask yourself, is education promoting awareness in the company? Is it promoting a sensitivity in the company? Or is it actually giving them the ability to have responsive actions and activities in the company, and potentially, ideally, working towards transformative activities within the company that really help shape a new system that the world operates in? And so what I'd encourage all companies to look at and think about is where you lie on that spectrum and where your activities lie. Maybe education and CSR kind of gets you past that awareness and into that early stage sensitivity. And then the question also then comes is the hardest leap. How do we leap from being aware and sensitive within our company to actually being responsive and transformative? And that's where the selection of how and who you engage with through your corporate engagement is really, really crucial. And the exciting thing is that there's no limit of opportunities right now of how you can be engaged to be responsive and transformative. So here at the Incubation Network, something that we obviously support is innovation and entrepreneurship in this space. And similar to what Tom was pointing at, is it's really difficult for these solutions to be off the ground. However, if these solutions don't exist, it doesn't matter how many consumers start demanding alternatives. If these alternative approaches, if these alternative materials don't exist, we're all going to be stuck, gridlocked with unhappy customers, unhappy employees. So there's this really big call to say, who's willing to take on the initial risk in this space of innovation and really help these solutions get to a level where they can be replicated, get to the level where you maybe can actually procure these companies across your supply chains. And that brings me to a second point I saw in the survey, which is that 60% of this group is really seeking sustainable alternatives in business procurement. And 50% are already interested in accelerating innovation to bring new solutions to market. And I just want to highlight how crucial that is and how those are the steps that really help you from getting in that aware and sensitive space to really having more responsive and transformative activities within your company to ocean plastic pollution. And so I'm in respect to time, and only have about 15 minutes after the panel, I'm going to kind of leave that introduction to our work and that food for thought there. And I'd love to open it up for questions or to hand it off to, I guess, Stephanie to open it up in respect of time.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn, and to all of our panelists. 3 really interesting presentations. Yeah, let's kick off the Q&A for that. We have one already in the chat box from an attendee asking, so I'll throw this to the group. What is your view on ocean plastic generated by the shipping and offshore industry itself? And how critical is the industry's contribution to this issue?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. I think first of all, as an industry, they are stakeholders. They're major stakeholders in the ocean. And as such, they need to be essentially a beacon of trust and light for essentially marine stewardship. And I think there are 3 different ways that they interact with ocean plastic pollution and the issue itself. From what we've seen, there is much anecdotal evidence that just littering, essentially just small scale littering, but from seafarers still does go on quite regularly. And it's just a lack of really being connected to the issue or educated on the issue that is behind that. But that's never going to be a large contributor to ocean plastic pollution on the whole. But it is something I think all shipping industries can work with their seafarers to make sure they understand their role as stewards of the oceans, essentially. The second is with cargo loss. So this does happen from time to time. I know in Australia recently, there was a huge cargo container loss off Sydney, I think it was. And the irony was it was single-use plastic face masks, and they were just washing up everywhere. I had a friend out fishing who that day came back with like 30 bags of these face masks. So it's just traditional kind of cargo loss. And the last one is, I don't know whether it's controversial or not, but I mean, it's the shipping industry's role within kind of the transportation of waste exports. So waste export is a really kind of contentious subject. In theory, it should be fine if we're exporting high quality plastics to be recycled somewhere. But at the same time, why can't that be done in the location that it is consumed? So, I mean, it is always better to do that and not export it. But what we found kind of over the last decade is huge levels of low value kind of plastics being shipped to the other side of the world, where only 10, 20, 30% of it can be recycled. The last should be paid for to be disposed of responsibly. That's not happening. They're being burnt, or they're being dumped, or they're just entering the natural environment. And that's why China shut the door on it. Malaysia had a huge crisis in 2019 and shut the door on that as well. And it's not a direct responsibility of the shipping industry, but I mean, it is something that the shipping industry is playing a major role in. So they're the three kind of angles for me personally. I don't know about any of my fellow panelists.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've raised some really good points there, Tom, particularly with exports. I do think there's a responsibility within the shipping industry and the responsible organizations for those industries to push for transparency of exports of waste, because this is certainly something that higher income countries really need to start taking responsibility for and managing properly. And there are, I mean, to sort of defend the maritime industry, they are, in comparison to the rest of the plastics chain, more advanced with a lot of the policy that they have available. They have MARPOL, which has since the 60s banned the prevention of litter from shipping industries. For a long time, this didn't cover the fishing industry, which I'm sure, as we know, fishing gear is one of the biggest problems of marine plastic litter. It's one of the biggest threats to marine life. And that is being addressed jointly in efforts by the IMO and the FAO, who are specifically looking to target lost and abandoned fishing gear. They're implementing solutions like the mandatory marking of gear, and actually end producer responsibility seems to be developing for fishing gear as one of the first industries, really. And there's an EU drive to have extended producer responsibility for fishing gear by 2024. I think, yeah, so you really have the fishing gear and littering from ships, and then you have dumping and other platform sources from shipping. Container loss is actually a much bigger issue than people think. And there is also efforts being developed to really monitor the loss of container ships, which are transporting all these pellets around the world for plastic production. And also, I think an under-considered input is the microplastics from shipping. And again, I think this will sort of pave the way for policy monitoring and regulation, because we know that shipping via ballast water, grey water, and other discharges are dumping a lot of microplastics into the ocean. And there are some countries that are already taking that very seriously and considering monitoring and policy outcomes as a result of that. But ultimately, it does all tie down to education, and I think port reception facilities also play a huge part in tying these sea-based sources to land-based sources and waste management responsibilities. There's definitely a huge lack of waste reception facilities in port reception facilities.
Steph, I'm happy to take on Diana's question next.
Diana
Reeves?
On the global treaty?
Nope. Diana Reeves asked a question about investment and
I don't see that question, but yeah, take it away.
Great. So Diana, to answer your question, this is some of the space that we play in. We are partners with a multi-million-dollar investment fund, Circulate Capital, here in Singapore, but additionally work with a lot of different capital providers in this space. And so I'd love to kind of touch on that. Your question was, no matter how much cleanup you affect, if you do not turn off the tap, it's a wasted effort. Carbon credits have failed. Panel thoughts on EPR at teeth and the role of asset owners and asset allocators and investment choices. So I will stress that what's really exciting to see is that, in this movement against ocean plastic pollution, investors have included themselves in this movement and in this discussion. So specifically, we've been seeing a rapid increase in everyone from large financial institutions like Morgan Stanley to the creation of impact investment funds that are specifically focused on this cause, really stepping up and playing a role in investing in these solutions. And that's been super exciting to see and really important because so many of this issue, so much of this issue is actually really capital intensive, especially when we're talking about building infrastructure where there is little to none in some places. But more specifically, I think where we're at now too is looking at the role that more early stage investors can have in really catalyzing new ideas, new approaches, new solutions that are local, because this is a global issue, right? But if we look at materials and sustainable material production, there'll have to be solutions in an array or portfolio of different opportunities we have. And similarly, we'll go with a lot of different kind of schemes or approaches that we use, because so much of waste management and also behaviors, such as we talked about, like the sachet economy, they are really controlled by a lot of local communities, and so having a portfolio of different solutions that have access to capital and are able to kind of strengthen their reach when we're talking about huge populations, I think it's just it is a super crucial, and they are there and they are growing. And I do similarly think that, especially in the short run, as we've seen, to nod at your comment, yeah, carbon credits have had a challenging time. There's been some success, but there's also been a lot of experiences on the opposite side of the spectrum. And I do think in the short term, there can be a lot more success in really thinking not just about investment and the investment moving into the space, but also thinking as more people are investing in the space, how will that also shift the way we're talking about ESG and what metrics that we're looking for when we're measuring ESGs and setting ESG standards, and how maybe the circular economy can kind of feed into that movement. So I'll leave that one at there. Ewa also had a separate question about Singapore I can answer really quickly, which is about waste manager. In Singapore, waste management infrastructure is in place, but only 4% of plastic is recycled. What is your view on this? I've actually, through different channels, had to comment on this a number of times. And I think the truth is Singapore is aware of this challenge. They're aware of how much plastic that per capita is used in Singapore versus other countries. Sometimes it's 10 times the amount in normal countries, or I should say normal countries, similarly developed countries. Additionally, they've really seen that the recycling infrastructure and approaches are either inadequate or sometimes under threat due to ongoing growth in regulatory environmental regulations that are happening in neighboring countries that are going to affect the way where Singapore ships some of its plastic waste for recycling and what happens with it. So the exciting thing is that Singapore is aware that they can and need to do better, and that they have a really strong group of committees that are looking at it similarly to how they looked at water and trying to take those learning experiences to say, how can we treat this resource similarly, and how can we be responsible and engineer a more sustainable future? So there can be a lot more done, but I think there's their focus on doing a lot more is there. I will hand that off to the next panelist, the next question now.
Hi, so yeah, there's just a question coming from Simon regarding the comments I made on ballast water. So yeah, just to add to that, there has been microplastics found in ballast water and grey water from shipping. There are, as you say, filtration mechanisms that have been put into place. That's how we know they're in there. There are companies for small vessels already offering bilge water, grey water and ballast water filtration specifically for microplastics. It's actually providing an opportunity to monitor microplastics in the ocean and given tracks of vessels. And yeah, I meant the comment more as it's an opportunity for us to develop policy and monitoring around microplastics. And I think that's, you know, my whole point around the shipping industry is, yes, they do get targeted for being the evil shipping industry responsible for all sorts of pollution emissions. But actually, they have got more policy frameworks in place that hopefully other industries will be able to look at moving forward. For example, microplastics or waste management on board or in ports. And yet, recycling of fishing gear is another huge opportunity. You know, there's been nylon 6 that's been invented to infinitely recycle fishing gear and clothing and other products that you can make from it. And yeah, this extended producer responsibility that's coming for fishing gear is a huge step forward for industries in general, not just the fishing industry. So yeah, I wasn't trying to.
I thought I'd just add, I just wanted to look in terms of numbers, shipping, both shipping and essentially discarded fishing nets they represent 20% of the the best estimates and
yeah, well, depending on where you look, I think, there are some beaches, a recent study in Aldabra and Mauritius found, the Seychelles found 80% of the waste there to be fishing gear, and it's thought to contribute over half of the Pacific.
Sure, and look at it, I'm sure it varies region, but more from, when you look at it a global, and you're looking at from the collective sources, it's significant, but it is just part of the complex, as we mentioned, contribution. If it's all right, I wanted to just shift to the treaty question, which I think is actually really insightful and really interesting to bring up, and really to speak to that having a UN treaty on this will probably be the most significant leap forward that we could see actual progress and traction with. The best example of a successful international treaty on environmental issues, the Montreal Protocol, that emerged and was put into legislation in the early 90s. That was the reason the world was managed and to address the hole in the ozone layer, which was being created by the release of the chlorofluorocarbons from the refrigerants that are used in air conditioning and chillers. And this UN treaty, this international agreement to phase out refrigerants that contain CFCs was really the reason we were able to address and actually fix this massive, really life-seizing issue, such as the hole in the ozone layer. So I do believe a global treaty on plastic pollution is a very important component, in addition to investments, in addition to innovation and the role of industry and the voluntary credit markets that are emerging, and all these elements. But without proper legislation and policy collectively, there'll just be way too many loose ends. And similar to the carbon market, there will be in the voluntary space, there'll be those who will use it as more of a smoke and mirrors aspect for offsets rather than for tangible, measurable impact.
Anya, that was a great answer, in my opinion. I'm just going to jump on to one of the last questions because I'm conscious of time, and there is one that is very focused at individuals and less at industry and policy level, which is probably a good place to start wrapping up. It has just disappeared, but I think I can remember it, which was, apart from, what was it now? Where's it gone? I think someone just...
Apart from beach cleanups and using less plastic, what else can the general public do to help today?
There you go. Okay, so obviously there are the educational things. There are 7 billion people on this earth, so never underestimate the power of people. It's easy to think that only industry has a part to play in this, but 7 billion people plus, they have a big plastic consumption. So I would always say, beyond just the awareness and the education, which everybody should take time to learn about this issue and about products and different types of plastics and circularity. I think we've got a real opportunity here to use our, I guess, our spending power. What are we buying? What are we choosing? Which brands are we choosing, and why are we choosing them, to really dictate the way that big industry responds to this. I think if there is genuine kind of financial benefit to these businesses from producing a more circular designed product, because actually they're going to sell twice as many as their competition, they will absolutely do that. I think a lot of big companies are working towards that anyway, because it's the right thing to do. But as consumers, if you really, really want to kind of play a big part in this, is make sure that we're choosing responsible businesses, circular products, recycled material or recyclable material, and I guess last of all, just question everything, because just because something ticks all those boxes doesn't necessarily mean there isn't an inkling of greenwashing in there as well. So make better choices, spend money wisely, and just second guess everything.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. Maybe if we finish up with just one more question. So how about, I'll just throw this one to the group. Should solutions be voluntarily adopted by companies? And what would be their incentive to do so?
I'm happy to jump in on that one. There's a real strong business case for companies, and I think across all industry sectors, to essentially shift or transition towards this approach for efficiency, for minimal resource use, for slowing, narrowing, and closing the loops of resources and materials. It leads to job creation, it leads to supply chain resilience, and certainly it leads to a better differentiator in terms of the CSR and stakeholder image, and et cetera. So there is a tremendous upside to really being the leader in this space, regardless of whether it's the food and beverage sector or it's the shipping industry, or more, the electronics and the fashion businesses. So it's about job creation, as I mentioned, and it's really the next sweep of innovation as we transition and transform towards I think what will be the acceptable paradigm from the linear space, and more aligned with the way the natural world actually works.
Brilliant. Any other comments from panelists? Lovely. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. And I think we'll finish off the session by asking our poll again that we asked at the beginning, to see if anybody's changed their mind on what we initially asked. So do you think your company could decrease their plastic footprint? Yes, we can make changes. No, we don't need to. As a company, we don't produce or use plastic. We're already doing everything we can do to decrease this. Or no, I would like to know more about how my company could decrease its plastic footprint. Oh, fantastic. What a result. Well, I'm sure, yeah, all of the panelists and myself will be happy to carry on conversations with anybody after this session. It's been a really, really great and interesting session. Lots of great questions and presentations from our panelists. Thank you very, very much for everybody for attending today, and for everybody involved in hosting this event. And thank you again to the British Chamber of Commerce for putting this together.
Great, thank you very much, Stephanie, Tom, Jocelyn and Anya, for giving us your time today. I'm sure everyone's had a really interesting time and learned a lot. I just want to quickly, for those who are left on the call, just remind everyone of a few amazing events that are coming up that the Chamber's hosting. Don't forget the BritCham Christmas party, which is going to be an interactive musical extravaganza. It's on the 3rd of December, and there's a lot of amazing prizes to win just by taking part. There's also the future outlook of supply chains, challenges, solutions and impact on trade on the 8th of December, and also marketing in the time of COVID-19. What do consumers expect from brands on the 10th of December? Thank you very much for everyone who's joined today. You will receive a feedback form. So if you do have any feedback that can help us make these events more informative or more solutions orientated, then please do let us know how we can do that. Thank you very much. And we hope you can join us for another event soon.